Hook, the city never sleeps. It roars, it pulses, it devours the weak and glorifies the strong. But in its restless heartbeat, there's a dangerous silence and absence of empathy, a blindness to those around us. The subway rumbles through the veins of New York, metallic wheels grinding against steel. It's rush hour, the worst of the day. The cars are filled to the brim in crumpled suits gripping overhead rails, women with tired eyes clutching shopping bags, students balancing backpacks that feel heavier than their dreams. The air smells of sweat, rain, and impatience. No one speaks. 100 people pressed together, yet all are isolated, lost in glowing screens, headphones, or their own exhaustion. The camera sweeps across faces, an elderly man rubbing his aching knees, a mother trying to keep her child from crying, a nurse still in scrubs with dark circles under her eyes. The world moves on autopilot, everyone pretending not to see the struggles of others. And then there he is, a boy, maybe 17, sitting like the subway car belongs to him. His designer jacket is unzipped, flashing a gold chain that catches the flickering lights. Headphones cover his ears, music loud enough to leak into the stale air. His legs stretch across 2 seats, taking more space than he needs, more space than he deserves. He scrolls lazily through his phone, laughing at memes while people around him sway uncomfortably, forced to stand. An older woman grips the railing just inches away, her knuckles white, but he doesn't notice. Or maybe he does and he doesn't care. This is the portrait of arrogance. The kind of arrogance money buys, the kind parents ignore, the kind society shrugs at. Around him, passengers glance with subtle irritation, but no one dares speak. They sigh, they shift, but they remain silent. The train screeches into another station, brakes crying against the rails. Doors slide open and more passengers cram inside. The air grows tighter, heavier. Among them enters a figure who will change everything. A young woman, weary but strong, clutching her swollen belly with both hands. A pregnant mother. She stumbles slightly as the car jerks forward, catching herself on the nearest pole. Her face tightens. She's tired, too tired. She scans the seats, her eyes landing on the one place she should have belonged, the seat taken by the boy with headphones. But he doesn't move. Doesn't even look up. She grips the pole, biting her lip, holding her discomfort in silence. The camera lingers on the contrast, her fragility against his entitlement. The crowd watches, whispers behind their lips, but no one intervenes. And that is when the narrator's voice cuts through, cold and sharp. On this night, a crowded subway became a stage, and what unfolded within these rattling walls would remind everyone of a truth long forgotten. Respect costs nothing, yet it is worth everything. The screen fades to black for a beat, only the hum of the subway echoing. Then the words appear. When a rich teen refuses to give his seat to a pregnant woman, a stranger will teach him a lesson he'll never forget. The ride has begun, the teen's arrogance. The subway car rattled forward, its fluorescent lights flickering in rhythm with the tracks below. The air was thick with the tired silence of working-class souls, each clutching at a briefcase, a grocery bag, or simply at the last ounce of energy left after the grind of the day. But in the middle of this weary sea sat one boy who didn't belong. He was a contrast in every way. While the passengers wore wrinkled shirts and scuffed shoes, his designer jacket gleamed under the artificial lights. It was the kind of jacket most couldn't afford even after a month of paychecks. His jeans were ripped not from wear but by design, artfully frayed at the edges, the kind you only found in boutique stores. A gold chain swung lazily against his chest, catching the light each time the train lurched. In his hands, the latest smartphone. Its sleek screen glowed bright as his thumb flicked upward in rapid motion, scrolling endlessly. Occasionally he would smirk, his lips curling into a private laugh at something on his feed. Each chuckle felt loud in the silence of the train, even though no words left his mouth. His legs sprawled across 2 seats, sneakers spotless and expensive, the kind that turned heads in malls. He leaned back like a king in his throne, one hand tapping against the armrest in rhythm with the beat blasting through his headphones. The music was so loud that even the passengers around him could hear the bass thumping. A crude soundtrack imposed on the tired crowd. The narrator's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. Some people ride the subway with humility, sharing space, carrying respect for the strangers beside them. But then there are those who believe the world owes them comfort, those who sit not with gratitude but with arrogance. and arrogance was written in every detail of this boy's presence. A woman in her 60s stood in front of him, gripping the rail as the car jolted. Her back hunched, her lips pressed tight from the strain of standing, but he didn't move, didn't glance up. She was invisible to him. Across from him, a man in a cheap suit shot a quick glare, then looked away. The expression lingered, though. The irritation of someone who wanted to say something but lacked the courage to stir conflict. The boy noticed none of this. Or perhaps he noticed and chose not to care. He stretched further, exhaling like he was in his living room instead of a crowded train. His fingers moved over the phone again, swiping through images of luxury vacations, flashy cars, and parties that reeked of excess. He laughed louder this time, ignoring the weary silence around him. The train jolted again and passengers swayed like branches in a storm. A nurse, still in scrubs, tightened her grip on the pole, her hands trembling from exhaustion. She glanced at the boy, at the empty space his legs selfishly occupied, then lowered her eyes. Her lips pressed thin, but she said nothing. Silence had become the unspoken rule. The boy's entitlement was a weight on the car, but no one dared to lift it. The narrator's voice returned, slower now, dripping with disdain. He thought himself untouchable. Above the tired souls who worked for every dollar. Above the unwritten rules of courtesy that hold a society together. In his mind, this train wasn't filled with equals, it was filled with servants. And he was their king. The boy yawned theatrically, pulling his hood further over his head. He leaned sideways, scrolling once more, pausing to type a quick comment. His music swelled louder, drowning even the screech of the rails. He bobbed his head to the beat, utterly disconnected from the world. One older man coughed deliberately, a sharp sound aimed in his direction. The boy's eyes flicked up for the briefest moment, cold, dismissive, and then back to his screen. He turned the volume higher, his smirk widening. It wasn't ignorance. It was defiance. He knew the glances, the stares, the quiet disapproval, but to him they were powerless. None of these people mattered. Their opinions were as disposable as the coffee cups rolling under the seats. The camera lingered on his face. Smooth skin, sharp jawline, arrogance radiating from every feature. His eyes were glued to the phone, but there was a smugness in the way he held himself, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Outside, the train roared into another tunnel, darkness swallowing the windows. Inside, the boy was the only one who seemed comfortable. The narrator whispered. He laughed at a world he did not respect. He mocked a code he did not live by. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this ride would not end as it began. Tonight, arrogance would meet its reckoning. The camera pulled back, showing the boy stretched arrogantly across his seat, headphones pulsing, gold chain flashing. Around him, tired eyes watched in silence, each passenger silently asking the same question. Who will put him in his place? The train rattled on, unaware that the answer was already here, sitting quietly, watching, waiting. The pregnant woman. The subway screeched into the next station, brakes squealing, sparks flashing briefly against the tunnel walls. The doors slid open with a metallic sigh, and the weary crowd shifted to make space for new passengers. Among them was a woman who carried not just a bag, but a visible weight in every step she took. Sarah, her hair clung to her temples with sweat from the day's labor. She wore a faded work blouse stretched tight against her swollen belly, and her hands clutched the straps of a worn canvas bag that seemed heavier than it was. Her breathing was steady but strained, every step measured. The kind of tired that lived in the bones, not just the muscles. She stepped into the train with care, one hand instinctively pressing against her stomach as if to shield the life inside. The other reached for the nearest pole, fingers gripping with quiet desperation. The train jolted and her body swayed awkwardly, the bag slipping down her shoulder. She caught herself barely, her knuckles whitening around the metal pole. The boy in the designer jacket didn't notice, or maybe he did and simply chose not to care. He remained sprawled across his seat, headphones thumping, phone glowing, legs claiming space that wasn't his to claim. Sarah looked around the crowded car, her eyes darting quickly from face to face. Exhaustion painted every passenger, but hers was different. Hers was a heaviness that begged for relief. Her lips parted, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Excuse me, would anyone mind if I sat?" Her words barely carried above the rumble of the train, yet they sliced through the silence like glass. A dozen pairs of eyes flickered toward her, and then away just as quickly. The man in the cheap suit pretended to dig into his briefcase. The nurse in scrubs adjusted her bag, pretending to search for something. A teenager fiddled with his earbuds, suddenly busy with invisible tasks. Silence. Shame painted the faces of many, but no one moved. No one wanted to be the one to confront the arrogance sprawled across the seat. The unspoken agreement was clear. Let someone else handle it. Sarah's smile faltered. She tightened her grip on the pole, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. The train lurched again, harder this time, and her body jolted forward. She caught herself with a soft gasp, her free hand pressed to her stomach. Sweat glistened across her brow, her discomfort painfully visible. The narrator's voice broke in, low and heavy with judgment. A mother-to-be stood among them, her strength waning, her body crying for rest. But in the face of need, the world turned its eyes away, and the one who had the power to help refused to see her at all. Sarah steadied herself, her lips pressed thin. She didn't ask again. She had learned long ago that repeating yourself when people had already chosen to ignore you only deepened the humiliation, so she stood silently, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, trying not to let the tears gather at the corners of her eyes. Her discomfort was a storm behind her calm exterior. Each sway of the subway threatened her balance. Each stop jolted her body, sending a flash of pain through her back. She shifted her bag higher on her shoulder, though it dug into her skin. A soft whimper escaped her lips, not loud, not desperate, just a crack in the armor of a woman holding too much. A sound no one should have ignored. The camera lingered on her face, tired, flushed, fragile, but unbroken. She brushed her hair back from her damp forehead, eyes closing for a moment as if willing herself to be anywhere but here. Across from her, the boy laughed at something on his phone, his head bobbing in rhythm with his music. The seat he occupied stretched like a throne beneath him, plenty of space for another if only he had the decency to shift. But his world was confined to pixels and beats, and Sarah was no more to him than background noise. Passengers exchanged glances, brief, guilty, conflicted. Some wanted to speak but feared confrontation. Others convinced themselves it wasn't their responsibility, and a few silently told themselves it wasn't their problem at all. Sarah's body swayed again as the subway thundered around a curve. Her knees bent instinctively, her grip tightening. Her lips trembled, but she held herself upright, unwilling to cry in front of strangers. Pride was all she had left in that moment. The narrator's voice grew sharper now, resonating like a verdict. She stood in silence, carrying not just herself, but a life yet to be born. And in that silence, a cruel truth echoed. Kindness is not always absent because it cannot be given. Sometimes it is absent because people choose to withhold it. The scene slowed. The boy's laughter, Sarah's quiet wince, the shifting glances of guilty faces. The camera pulled back, capturing the imbalance in one frame. A pregnant woman struggling to stand, and a spoiled boy lounging across space that wasn't his to hoard. And beneath it all, the question burned in every watcher's heart. How long would she endure? And who, if anyone, would dare to make things right? The subway roared on, carrying arrogance and suffering in the same car. But destiny was already awake, already watching. Something was coming. The refusal. The train rattled deeper into the tunnels, lights flickering overhead, shadows stretching across the cramped car. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she steadied herself against the pole, her breaths uneven, her body fighting for balance.
She had endured long enough. This time she didn't ask the crowd.
She fixed her eyes on the boy sprawled across the seat, his gold chain glinting under the fluorescent lights, his headphones pulsing with bass. He hadn't noticed her or had pretended not to. Either way, she had no choice but to speak. Her voice was soft, polite, but firm. "Excuse me. Would you mind letting me sit? I'm pregnant." The boy's head tilted lazily. He slid one headphone down to rest around his neck, smirking as if the request amused him. He scanned her briefly, her swollen stomach, her tired eyes, the way she gripped the pole for dear life, and then leaned back even further in his seat. "What, me?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Nah, I paid for this ride, same as everybody else. You can stand." A ripple of laughter broke out from a pair of teens in the corner, friends of his who had been watching with grins, waiting for his reaction. One of them snickered, nudging the other. "Yo, did you hear that? She wants his seat. Like he owes her or something." The boy chuckled, lifting his phone again. Man, people always want something for free. Sarah swallowed hard. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't move. Her grip on the pole tightened until her knuckles turned white. The pain in her back sharpened with every sway of the train. Still, she tried again, her voice breaking, whispering like a plea. Please, it's for my baby. For a split second, the air changed. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the boy and Sarah. The humanity in her words tugged at their conscience, but not enough to spark action. The boy, however, only rolled his eyes. He tilted his head back dramatically, as if she were asking for the impossible. Not my problem, he muttered flatly. The words struck harder than a shove. They landed heavy, cruel, indifferent. The teens in the corner burst into louder laughter, egging him on. One mimicked Sarah's soft tone, mocking, "Please, it's for my baby," exaggerating the words with a whiny sneer. The other leaned against the seat, nearly choking on his giggles. Sarah flinched, her lips pressed together, her eyes stinging as she blinked back, the tears rising fast. She turned slightly, trying to shield her face from the others, but there was no hiding her humiliation. The train lurched suddenly, jerking her forward. She stumbled, nearly losing her grip. Gasps rippled through a few passengers. An older man instinctively reached out but pulled his hand back before making contact, retreating into the same silence that bound them all. The boy chuckled again, muttering to himself, "Man, people always want special treatment." Passengers exchanged uneasy looks, guilt swimming in their eyes. A woman bit her lip, her hand twitching as if to rise, but fear held her down. A man clenched his jaw, glaring at the teen, but said nothing. Silence suffocated the car. The laughter of the teens rang louder, uglier. Sarah stood shaking, not just from the motion of the train, but from the ache of rejection. She pressed one hand protectively over her stomach, whispering to herself, almost inaudible, "It's okay. Just a little longer. For you, my love. Just a little longer." The narrator's voice slid in, heavy with quiet fury. When arrogance sits, humanity stands in silence. When cruelty laughs, compassion looks away. And a woman, tired, trembling, carrying the future in her arms, was left alone against a wall of indifference. The boy leaned back once more, slipping his headphones over his ears again, as if dismissing not just her request but her very existence. His legs stretched out, filling more space than he needed, his laughter joining the rhythm of the train's rattle. And Sarah, clutching the pole, holding her unborn child close, fought the urge to collapse. She wouldn't beg again, but destiny was listening. And the train's next stop was bringing more than just new passengers. It was bringing justice. The Rock observes. The subway car rattled on, its metal frame groaning as it swayed through the tunnels. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow that made the tension in the air even sharper. Sarah stood quietly near the pole, her hand on her stomach, her face turned away to hide the humiliation burning across her cheeks. The arrogant laughter of the teen and his friends still echoed like an ugly soundtrack to her suffering. But at the far end of the car, away from the noise, away from the cruelty, sat a man. He was hard to miss, though somehow he had gone unnoticed until now. A dark hoodie shadowed his face, the hood drawn low, his massive frame pressed into the corner seat. He sat quietly, still as stone, a takeout bag beside him, untouched. His posture wasn't slouched, but calm, steady, grounded, like the world could shake and he'd remain unmoved. The sway of the train rocked everyone else, but not him. His boots were planted, his shoulders squared, his silence almost unnerving. And yet, there was no hostility in it, just patience, watchfulness. At first, no one paid him much attention. But slowly, one by one, passengers began to notice. A woman near the door frowned, whispering to her husband. "Wait, doesn't he look familiar?" Her husband squinted. "No way, it can't be. Not here." A teenager, already clutching his phone, leaned forward in his seat. His eyes widened. Bro, I swear that's him. Look at the size of him. No one else looks like that." The whispers spread like fire across dry grass. Heads turned, voices dropped, curiosity replaced indifference. A few people dared to snap pictures, their phones trembling as they tried not to draw attention. The murmurs merged into one name, hushed but unmistakable: The Rock. Sarah hadn't noticed. She was still focused on standing tall despite her pain, her dignity balancing as precariously as she did in the swaying car. But the crowd's sudden shift was undeniable. Something was happening. The teen, oblivious in his arrogance, laughed again, muttering under his breath. He raised his phone, mimicking Sarah's soft voice in mockery. "Please, it's for my baby." His friends howled, their cruel laughter bouncing against the subway walls. One of them glanced toward the hooded figure and stiffened, but quickly looked away, pretending he hadn't noticed. The teen caught it, rolling his eyes. What are you looking at? Some dude in a hoodie? Please," he snorted, waving a dismissive hand. "Even celebrities can't help freeloaders." The words hung heavy in the air. A few passengers gasped softly, their eyes darting to the hooded man, waiting for a reaction. But he didn't move. "Not yet." He sat there, his gaze steady, unblinking, locked on the scene before him. The crowd's whispers grew, rising with suspense, as if the entire train were holding its breath. The teen leaned back in his seat again, smirking, tapping his foot to the beat of his music. He had no idea that the silence he mocked carried more power than his laughter ever could. Because the man in the hoodie wasn't just another passenger. He was justice, waiting. And soon, he would rise. The reveal. The subway car jolted as it sped through the tunnel, but the silence inside had become deafening. Conversations had died away, the cruel laughter of the teen and his friends fading into uneasy echoes. Every eye, every breath, seemed to wait on the man in the hoodie at the far end. And then, he moved. With a deliberate calm, he placed his hands on his knees and leaned forward. The fabric of his hoodie stretched over broad shoulders as he pushed himself up. The motion was unhurried, but it carried weight, like a mountain shifting after years of silence. He rose to his full height, towering, immense. The kind of presence that filled every inch of the narrow subway car, pressing against the air, commanding attention without a single word. His head brushed close to the ceiling, his boots planted firmly on the floor with a dull thud, echoing louder than the train's metallic groans. The passengers went still. Phones froze midair. The whispers died as if swallowed whole by the shadows of the tunnel. Step by step, he began walking down the aisle. The car rocked with each jolt of the tracks, but his stride never faltered. Each movement was steady, controlled, deliberate. A man who didn't need speed or noise. His presence alone carried the force of a storm. People parted instinctively, pressing back against their seats to make way. The aisle cleared in ripples, passengers bowing their heads slightly, some holding their breath as if afraid to disturb the moment. The only sounds were the hum of the train and the soft rhythm of his boots against the floor. Finally, he reached the row where the teen sat. The boy had been laughing moments earlier, but now his smirk twitched, caught between arrogance and unease. He yanked one headphone out, looking up with irritation. "What do you want, old man?" He sneered, his voice louder than it needed to be, clinging to bravado. His friends chuckled nervously, though their eyes darted away. The man in the hoodie stopped. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up with one hand, gripped the edge of his hood, and pulled it back. The fabric fell. Gasps erupted instantly, sharp and explosive, sweeping through the train like lightning cracking the sky. "It's him, oh my God, it's The Rock. Dwayne Johnson. No way, no way. Holy, this is insane." Phones shot up. Cameras clicked. Passengers scrambled to capture the moment, but most just sat in stunned silence, their mouths open, their hearts racing. There he stood, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. His face was calm, carved with the kind of strength that didn't need to prove itself. Water from the tunnel mist glistened on his shaved head and his eyes burned, not with anger, but with a firm, unshakable resolve. He turned his gaze directly onto the teen. The boy faltered. His cocky grin wavered, his shoulders stiffening as if the weight of every decision he'd ever made suddenly pressed down. But still, his pride forced him to scoff. "What, you gonna tell me what to do?" The Rock's voice came deep, steady, and commanding, the kind of voice that silenced rooms, that carried truth heavier than steel. "That seat," he said slowly, pointing to the cushioned space beneath the boy, "was never yours. It was a responsibility, and you failed it." The words cut sharper than any shout. The train seemed to tremble with their weight. Passengers leaned forward, eyes wide, the truth ringing in their bones. The teen swallowed, his arrogance faltering. His friends shrank into their seats, no longer laughing, no longer smirking. The Rock didn't break eye contact. He didn't need to. His presence alone demanded obedience. He turned slightly, his massive hand gesturing toward Sarah, who still clung to the pole, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "Come," he said gently. Sarah hesitated, stunned. Her eyes darted from the towering figure to the sneering teen, unsure if she was dreaming. But the rock gave her a small, reassuring nod, the kind that told her it was safe, that she mattered. He extended one hand to her, not touching, but guiding. Slowly, she stepped forward. The train swayed and she stumbled, but before she could fall, the rock's steady arm caught her, supporting her with a gentleness that contrasted his immense strength. He guided her toward the seat. His hand hovered protectively at her back as if shielding her from the judgment of the world. The teen shifted awkwardly, his pride locking him into place. But under the weight of 1,000 eyes and the rock's steady glare, he finally moved. He slid out of the seat, muttering something under his breath, but no one heard it. No one cared. The rock gestured firmly toward the seat. "Sit." Sarah lowered herself gratefully, her hand never leaving her stomach. Relief washed over her face, her shoulders trembling with exhaustion. For the first time all evening, she wasn't standing in pain. She wasn't invisible. The rock stood beside her, his body blocking out the boy, his presence like a wall no cruelty could penetrate. And then, it began. A soft clap from the corner of the car. Then another. Then a third, until suddenly the subway car erupted in applause. The sound filled the metal walls, echoing like thunder rolling through the tunnel. Some passengers whistled. Others shouted words of praise, their voices carrying relief, admiration, and gratitude. Phones shook as people tried to capture the moment. Tears streamed down cheeks. Strangers exchanged nods of respect. The rock didn't smile. Not yet. His eyes remained steady, his face calm, as if reminding everyone that this moment wasn't about him. It was about the lesson. But Sarah wiped at her tears, overwhelmed. She whispered softly, her voice nearly drowned by the clapping. "Thank you." And though the rock didn't answer immediately, the faintest trace of a smile curved at the edge of his lips as he turned his gaze once more to the humbled teen. The applause continued, rising, filling the car like a wave of justice breaking through years of silence. And in that crowded subway, on an ordinary night in New York, something unforgettable had just begun. The rock's words. The applause echoed in the subway car, bouncing off the steel walls, drowning out the rattling of the tracks. Sarah sat finally in comfort, one hand protectively over her belly, her eyes glistening with gratitude. The spoiled teen who had moments ago been the king of arrogance now shrank into the corner of his seat, fidgeting with his phone as if it could shield him. The rock stood tall in the center of the aisle. He raised one hand, palm down, and the clapping faded, replaced by the heavy silence of anticipation. Every face turned toward him. Even the train itself seemed to hush, the screeching wheels fading into the background as if the city itself was waiting for his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady, deep. It carried the weight of lived truth. "I've been watching all of this," he began, his gaze sweeping over the passengers, pausing on the teen, then softening when it landed on Sarah. "And I've got to tell you, what happened here tonight isn't just about a seat. It's about something bigger, something that too many of us forget." He shifted slightly, leaning on the rail, not as a celebrity, but as a man opening his heart. "You see this woman?" He gestured toward Sarah. "She didn't ask for luxury. She didn't ask for special treatment. She asked for one thing, a little respect, a little compassion, and the truth is, it costs nothing, not a dime, not a cent." The boy looked down, guilt flickering across his face. The rock continued, "I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to be invisible, to feel like no one cares. My mother raised me with nothing. There were days we didn't know if we'd eat, nights when we were evicted, carrying trash bags full of clothes because we didn't have a home. I remember looking at her, this strong woman, and seeing the tears she tried to hide." His voice trembled for a brief moment, then steadied with steel. "And I'll never forget that pain, because it taught me something. It taught me that respect has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with status, nothing to do with how shiny your shoes are or how expensive your phone is. Respect," he said, his voice rising, "is about seeing someone else's pain and doing what you can, even if it's small, to make it lighter." The crowd hung on every word. The nurse in the corner wiped at her eyes. An older man nodded slowly, tears welling. A teenager recording on his phone lowered it, ashamed. The rock turned back to the boy. He wasn't angry. His tone was firm, but not cruel. You had a chance tonight. A chance to show strength. Real strength. Not the kind you flaunt on Instagram. Not the kind you wear around your neck. Strength of the heart. And instead you chose pride. You chose ego. The teen's jaw clenched, but he didn't look up. His friend stared at the floor. And here's the truth, son, the Rock said, his voice quiet now, almost tender. One day you're going to need kindness. One day, you'll hope someone looks at you and decides you matter. And when that day comes, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that respect isn't earned by mocking those in need. Respect is earned by sacrifice, by compassion, by seeing the human being in front of you. Sarah whispered softly from her seat, barely audible. Thank you. The Rock turned to her, nodding gently. No, ma'am. Thank you for reminding all of us what really matters. Applause began again, slower this time, more powerful. Not just clapping, but a release of emotion. Some passengers stood, honoring the moment. A woman reached out and touched Sarah's shoulder, offering her a smile. A man muttered, "He's right," shaking his head at his own silence earlier. The boy sat smaller than he had ever felt in his life. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by shame that weighed heavier than any gold chain. For the first time, he realized the difference between looking powerful and being powerless. The Rock placed one massive hand on the back of Sarah's seat, standing tall as the subway thundered into the next station. His final words hung in the air like a commandment. Respect isn't about wealth. It isn't about ego. Respect is about humanity. And if we forget that, then we've already lost more than money could ever buy. The car exploded in cheers. Not the shallow kind, but the deep, cathartic applause of people who knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. And in the center of it all, the Rock stood not as a celebrity, not as an icon, but as a man who had turned a subway car into a classroom of compassion. The teen's lesson. The subway car rattled through the dark tunnels, but inside the world had gone quiet again. The echoes of applause faded, leaving behind the heavy thrum of anticipation. All eyes were locked on the Rock and the boy. The teen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his expensive jacket suddenly feeling too tight, his gold chain too heavy. He fiddled with his phone, but even the glowing screen couldn't save him now. The Rock took a step closer, towering above him. His massive frame cast a shadow that seemed to swallow the boy whole. Yet his voice, when it came, wasn't angry. It was calm, measured, firm, but filled with something deeper. "What have you done today?" The Rock asked slowly. "To make the world better." The words hung in the air like thunder that refused to roll away. The boy blinked, confused as if he'd misheard. What do you mean?" he stammered, trying to sound defiant, but his voice cracked. The Rock didn't look away. His gaze was steady, unyielding, pulling the truth straight from the boy's chest. "I asked you a simple question. What have you done today to make the world better?" The boy's lips parted, then closed again. He tried to form an answer, but nothing came. He thought about the hours wasted scrolling on his phone, the laughter at memes, the careless way he'd brushed off Sarah's pain. For the first time that night, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by something far more human. "Shame. I don't know," he muttered, barely audible. The Rock crouched slightly, lowering himself until his eyes met the boy's. His voice softened, but it carried even more weight. "Listen, son. Every choice you make defines you. You can choose arrogance, or you can choose respect. You can choose to put yourself above others, or you can choose to lift someone up. That's who you really are, not the clothes, not the chain, not the phone. But the choices," the boy swallowed hard. Around him, the passengers leaned forward, hanging on every word. It wasn't just for him, it was for all of them. A lesson carved into steel in silence. The Rock straightened again, his broad shoulders filling the car. "Tonight you failed that choice. You saw someone in pain, someone who needed help, and you decided to look away. Worse, you mocked her. That's not strength. That's weakness." The boy's eyes burned, his pride cracking. He clenched his fists, not in anger, but in the desperate fight against his own tears. "And here's the truth," the Rock continued, pointing a massive hand toward Sarah, who now sat watching with wide, trembling eyes. "You had the power to make her day easier. You had the chance to show the world who you could be, but you didn't take it. And now you have a chance to make it right." The boy's chest rose and fell quickly. He looked at Sarah, who sat quietly, Her hands still on her belly, her face both tired and kind. For the first time that night, he really saw her. Not as an inconvenience, not as someone to ignore, but as a person. He stood slowly, his legs shaky, his bravado gone. He faced Sarah, his voice low, trembling. I'm sorry, he whispered. Then louder so everyone could hear. I was wrong. I should have given you my seat. I should have respected you. Sarah's lips parted in surprise. Her eyes softened. She nodded gently. Thank you, she said, her voice tender but firm. The Rock placed a massive hand on the boy's shoulder. Not rough, not crushing, but steady, like a father guiding a son. That's the first step, he said. His tone carried approval, but also a challenge. Apologies are where change begins, but the real test is what you do tomorrow. And the day after that, and every day after that. Remember this feeling, son, and never forget, it's never too late to choose respect. The boy nodded, his face flushed, but his eyes clear. For the first time that night, he didn't look like a spoiled child hiding behind wealth. He looked like a boy learning how to become a man. Around them, the passengers erupted again, not in laughter, not in cruelty, but in applause. Not for the Rock this time, but for the boy who had taken the first step toward change. The Rock stepped back, his arm still hovering protectively over Sarah, his presence still commanding the room. He didn't need to say more. The lesson had been taught, not just to the teen, but to everyone crammed into that subway car. The boy sat quietly now, his shoulders lower, his pride humbled, his heart heavier but stronger. He had learned in the harshest, most unforgettable way that respect wasn't optional. It was everything. And as the subway thundered into the next station, it carried with it more than just passengers. It carried a truth, etched in steel, spoken by a giant, lived in a single choice. Respect costs nothing, but it can change everything. Redemption and unity. The Rock's words still echoed like thunder in the narrow subway car. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire train had been frozen, passengers processing the lesson they had just witnessed. The air felt different, lighter, charged with something new, compassion. Then quietly, the shift began. A man in a suit, his tie loosened, his face tired, stood up from the far corner and reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a cold bottle of water and walked carefully down the aisle. He knelt slightly, offering it to Sarah with a gentle smile. Here, ma'am, he said softly. For you and the baby. Sarah blinked, surprised by the kindness, her lips trembling as she whispered, Thank you. She took the bottle with both hands, holding it as if it were made of gold. Another passenger, a middle-aged man in work boots, stepped closer. Which stop are you getting off at? He asked, his voice warm. I'll help you down the stairs when we get there. Make sure you're steady. Sarah nodded, overwhelmed, her eyes filled with tears, not from pain this time, but from relief. From the other end of the car, an elderly woman, her silver hair pinned neatly, leaned forward on her cane. She looked directly at the Rock, then at Sarah, and spoke in a voice quivering but strong. The world needs more men like this, she said. Her words rippled through the crowd, sinking into every heart, and just like that, the once tense, hostile subway transformed. People who had been strangers minutes ago now spoke softly to one another, offering smiles, small acts of care, and above all, respect. But perhaps the most striking moment came from the boy. The same teen who had once sprawled arrogantly across the seat now sat quietly, his head low, his hands twisting nervously in his lap. He looked broken, not by humiliation, but by realization. He glanced around, then toward the far end of the train where an elderly man clung shakily to the pole. For a moment, the boy hesitated. Then, taking a deep breath, he stood. He stepped toward the man, clearing his throat awkwardly. Sir, he muttered, his voice small but earnest, would you like my seat? The older passenger blinked in surprise. Slowly, he nodded. Thank you, son. The boy helped guide him into the seat, steadying his arm as the train jolted. It was clumsy, awkward, but it was real. His friends watched, stunned, saying nothing. The Rock noticed. His lips curved into the faintest smile, a rare, quiet approval. He didn't clap or cheer. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. That's how change begins. Sarah leaned back in her seat, sipping water, her hand resting over her belly. She smiled softly at the boy, And for the first time that night he looked up, not with arrogance but with gratitude. The subway continued its rumbling journey, but the atmosphere was no longer heavy. Laughter, not mocking but genuine, bubbled in small bursts. People helped one another adjust bags, offered space, shared nods of respect. It wasn't just a train car anymore. It was a community. And at the center of it all stood the Rock, silent now, watchful. His presence a steady reminder of what respect looked like when it was lived, not spoken. The train screeched into the next station, sparks lighting up the tunnel outside. As the doors opened, passengers began to step off, but not before exchanging glances. Silent promises that they would carry this lesson with them beyond the steel walls. Sarah rose slowly, helped by the man in work boots. The boy who had mocked her moments earlier stepped forward, carrying her small bag without being asked. The elderly woman with the cane pressed a hand against the Rock's arm as she passed. "Thank you," she whispered. He simply nodded, his faint smile never fading. And as the train pulled away from the platform, carrying those who remained, it left behind more than echoes of footsteps and rattling tracks. It left behind unity, compassion, a lesson carved into the hearts of everyone who had been there. That respect costs nothing, but it has the power to change everything. The train rattled on through the dark tunnels, its steel wheels screaming against the tracks. But inside the car, the mood had shifted entirely. What had begun as just another New York rush hour ride had transformed into something no one would forget. Sarah sat safely now, leaning back into her seat. Her hands rested gently on her belly, her face flushed with relief. She took a deep breath, sipping from the bottle of water given to her, her eyes closing briefly as though for the first time all day she could finally exhale. The tension in her shoulders had melted away. Around her, the passengers were no longer strangers. They exchanged small smiles, nods of acknowledgement, and even a few whispered words of apology. Some offered help, some simply stood taller. Their expressions changed, not hardened with indifference, but softened with understanding. At the far end of the car, the teen sat still, quieter than before. His head bowed, his arrogance stripped away, leaving behind something simpler: humility. He had stumbled, been corrected, and in that correction he had discovered the first spark of respect. And then there was the Rock. He stood by the exit doors, massive frame steady as the train swayed. His hood was drawn back now, and though every passenger's eyes were on him, he didn't seek attention. He didn't need applause, didn't need recognition. His work here was done. The narrator's voice entered, carried on a rising emotional score. That night, a spoiled teen learned that respect is not a luxury. It is a duty. The camera lingered on the boy, his expression humbled, his phone forgotten, his lesson carved deep into his heart. A weary mother discovered that kindness still exists in the world. The shot turned to Sarah, smiling softly as she rested, her faith in humanity momentarily restored. And a train full of strangers remembered that respect and empathy matter more than ego. The crowd filled the frame, ordinary people, changed by an extraordinary moment. Their silence was no longer empty. It was full of meaning. As the train screeched into the next stop, the doors opened. The Rock stepped out quietly, disappearing into the crowd of the platform without a word, without waiting for gratitude. His shadow stretched against the station wall before vanishing into the night.